Under the bright lights of the Family Feud studio, laughter and excitement filled the air. The audience clapped, the band played, and Steve Harvey stood center stage with that familiar twinkle in his eyes. It was supposed to be just another fun episode, families competing, jokes flying, everyone smiling. But that day, something extraordinary was about to happen. A young woman named Ashana Jane stood at her family's podium, her parents watching proudly from the audience. They didn't look like people chasing fame or fortune. They looked humble, grateful to simply be there. Steve greeted them warmly, cracking a few jokes as usual, but there was something about Ashana that caught his attention. Her posture, her calm confidence, and the way her parents looked at her. It was deeper than just pride. When Steve asked her what she did for a living, Ashana smiled softly. "I'm a doctor," she said. The crowd clapped. "That's amazing," Steve replied, smiling. "How long have you been practicing?" "Just over 2 years," she said. "I work at a community clinic here in Los Angeles." Steve nodded. "That's wonderful. You must be proud." Ashana hesitated for a second. "I am," she said. "But if I'm here today, it's really because of them." She turned toward her parents in the audience. "They're the reason I became a doctor at all." The camera panned toward her parents. Her father in a simple suit, her mother in a traditional sari, both smiling shyly. Steve could tell there was more to this story. So he asked, "What do you mean by that?" Ashana took a deep breath. "I grew up in Rajasthan, India. My father was a school teacher. My mother was a seamstress. When I got accepted into medical school, we didn't have enough money to pay for tuition. My parents, they sold our house." The audience gasped. Even Steve's usual grin faded. "You sold your house?" he asked. Her father nodded quietly from the audience. "Yes, sir," he said. His voice was gentle but steady. "We sold our house so she could study medicine." For a moment, the room went silent. You could almost hear hearts beating. Steve looked back at Ashana, struggling to find the right words. "So you're telling me your parents gave up the roof over their heads so you could become a doctor?" Ashana's eyes glistened. "Yes. They said a house can be built again, but a dream might not come twice." The audience broke into applause, not the usual clapping of a game show crowd, but something deeper, more emotional. People stood up. Some wiped tears. Steve took a step back, looking at her with admiration. "You know what you are?" he said softly. "You're not just a doctor. You're living proof of what love and sacrifice can build." Ashana shook her head. "My parents are the real heroes," she said. "I just studied. They gave up everything." Steve turned toward her parents. "Uncle, Auntie," he said respectfully, "do you ever regret selling your home for her education?" Her father stood up again, adjusting his glasses. His English was accented but clear. "Sir, we built a house of bricks and cement," he said. "But Ashana, she built a house of knowledge and service. Which one do you think will last longer?" That line hit everyone like a wave. The audience was on their feet again, cheering, clapping, crying. Steve just stood there speechless for a moment before starting a slow clap that grew louder and louder. Then he turned to Ashana's mother. "Auntie, what about you?" he asked gently. Her mother stood shyly, speaking in Hindi as Ashana translated. She says when she was young, her parents told her that girls didn't need education. She studied only till the 8th grade, but she promised herself that her daughter would have every opportunity she didn't. Ashana's voice trembled as she translated her mother's next words. "Every stitch I sewed, every night I worked, I thought of her wearing a doctor's coat. Today, when people call her Dr. Sahiba, I know every sacrifice was worth it." Steve turned back to Ashana, visibly moved. "You realize what you've done here today?" he said. "You've shown every parent watching that investing in their children's education is the greatest investment they can ever make. And you've shown every child watching what they owe to parents who sacrifice for them." Ashana smiled. "That's why I came on the show," she said. "Not for the money, though it would help my parents, but to share this story. To let other immigrant families know they're not alone. To tell other daughters that their dreams are worth fighting for." Steve nodded slowly, then said, "You know what? I can feel it. Your family's going to win today. But even if you didn't, I'm making you a promise right now. Your story is going to reach millions. People need to hear what love looks like." And Steve was right. The Jane family did win, $20,000. But the real victory came later. When the episode aired, Ashana's story went viral. Within hours, her clip spread across social media. People around the world shared it: doctors, parents, students, immigrants. Two-number daughter's medical education began trending online. Medical schools in India reposted the video, using it to advocate for affordable education. Immigrant families from across the U.S. wrote messages saying how they saw their own struggles reflected in hers. But the most amazing response came from a group of Indian American doctors. Many of them had similar stories: parents who sold land, jewelry, or cars to send their children to school. They came together to start a foundation called Houses to Hospitals, providing scholarships to students whose families faced impossible financial choices. Within 6 months, they raised over $10 million. The first scholarship went to a young woman from the same town in Rajasthan where Ashana grew up. Her father was a rickshaw driver. Her mother cleaned houses. They were about to sell their only plot of land for medical tuition, but they didn't have to. Ashana flew to India to present the scholarship herself. When she handed over the certificate, she said, "No parent should have to choose between a roof over their head and their child's dreams. This scholarship ensures you can have both." Her words spread across newspapers and television channels. Medical institutions began reevaluating their fee structures. Some introduced new need-based programs specifically for middle-class families who earned too much to qualify for aid, but too little to afford the costs. A year later, Steve Harvey invited Ashana and her parents back to his talk show. This time they looked healthier, happier, and lighter. "How has life changed since that day?" Steve asked. Her father smiled proudly. "Financially, we are stable now," he said. "But more importantly, we have received thousands of letters from parents who said our story gave them hope. Teachers, workers, families like ours. They write saying, if we could do it, they can too." Steve turned to Ashana. "And you? How's your life now?" She smiled. "I still work at the community clinic, but once a month I go back to India. We've started free medical camps in rural areas, focusing on women's health. My mother comes with me. She says it's her way of giving back." Steve leaned in. "Show them what you showed me backstage." Ashana reached into her bag and pulled out a framed photograph. It showed a simple brick placed in a small garden surrounded by flowers. "This is the brick my father saved from our old house," she said. "We framed it in glass. It sits in our garden now, reminding us that from one small sacrifice, beautiful things can grow." The audience stood again, applauding. Steve looked at the photo, then at the crowd. "You see this?" he said softly. "This is what love looks like, a brick. A simple brick that represents everything parents will do for their children." Tears filled many eyes. Cameras zoomed in on the brick, then back to the family standing arm in arm. Ashana looked into the camera and said, "To every immigrant family watching, your sacrifices matter. Your children see them. We carry the weight, yes, but also the strength you give us. To every daughter whose parents were told she wasn't worth educating, prove them wrong. And to every parent wondering if the sacrifice is too much, look at my parents. They gave up a house but gained a legacy." That episode became one of the most watched Family Feud moments of all time. Over 50 million views across social media. Letters poured in from around the world. One stood out to Ashana. A girl from Mumbai wrote, "When your father talked about building a house of knowledge instead of bricks, my father stood up and said, 'We're paying for engineering college.' Dr. Ashana, you didn't just tell your story. You changed mine." The Houses to Hospitals Foundation continued to grow rapidly. They provided not only scholarships but mentorship programs, connecting successful doctors with struggling students. Ashana now serves on the board, making sure scholarships go to those whose families made real sacrifices, those who understand the value of service. Several medical schools introduced something new: sacrifice scholarships, awarded to students whose families had given up significant assets for education. The applications even included essays titled, "What My Family Sacrificed for My Dream." Stories of hardship became symbols of pride. Steve Harvey often mentions that episode as the one that changed his perspective on the show. "We think Family Feud is just about funny answers," he says in interviews. But sometimes a simple question opens the door to something profound. Ashana reminded me why I do this, not for laughs, but for moments when we get to witness the best of humanity. Ashana's parents eventually moved into a new home. In one of the rooms, they created a small library filled with medical textbooks and journals. They opened the doors to local students preparing for entrance exams. Her mother often says, "We couldn't give our daughter money for coaching classes, but we gave her something more valuable. The faith that we believed in her completely. That faith is free, but it's priceless." Ashana still wears simple pink saris when she speaks at medical schools, in memory of that day on Family Feud. When asked why, she smiles. "It reminds me that the most powerful moments in life don't need decoration. Sometimes all you need is truth spoken from the heart." Her story is now part of orientation programs for medical students, used to spark conversations about privilege, access, and the real cost of chasing dreams. Parent groups around the world have started fundraisers for education. And every time she's asked how one TV appearance could change so much, Ashana always says, "That's not my story. That's our story. Every parent who sacrifices, every child who succeeds, every patient cared for by someone who knows what it means to struggle. We're all part of the same story, and it's still being written." Steve Harvey keeps a photo from that day in his dressing room, Ashana standing between her parents, all three smiling through tears. He says it reminds him that sometimes the most expensive thing in the world isn't a car or a jet. It's the price parents pay to give their children wings. And when those children finally soar, they don't just lift themselves. They lift entire communities. That's the legacy of a simple answer on a game show. The power of truth spoken bravely. The mathematics of love, it always multiplies.